Hello, welcome. I believe this is episode 10 of our Spanish media diaries. So this is where I talk about all of the native media that I have been consuming in Spanish and what I think of it. Starting with shows, I watched the first season of Vis a Vis on Netflix, and this is a Spanish show. I think it's called Locked Up in English. It is a kind of crime drama-esque show that is located in a women's prison, and so we are following our main character who has been put in jail awaiting trial for fraud, basically, that her sketchy older boss boyfriend kind of tricked her into doing. So she is living in prison while waiting for this to get straightened out, if it is going to get straightened out. And obviously, prison is not a pleasant place to live, and so this is a little bit like Orange is the New Black, but I think it's quite a bit more intense than that show. I haven't ever watched that show, but this kind of combines aspects of drama with a little bit more of that crime thriller aspect. I really enjoyed season 1. It did have vibes of a show that's about to fall off the rails. Just there were a lot of crazy things happening towards the end, and so there were things that were a little bit questionable. I haven't continued yet. I might continue. I don't know. We'll see. There's also some very odd things in here regarding Islam and kind of just racialized people in general. Some of it I think is accurately depicting racism in prisons. And then some of it, almost all of the bad people are Muslim. Many people who aren't Muslim are also doing bad things in the show. They're just not necessarily being portrayed as bad characters. So, in that way, it's kind of meta commentary, but I don't know that they were thinking about it that deeply when they were doing it. So anyway, definitely some questionable aspects. Movies, I watched El Hoyo, which is called The Platform. This actually has a second movie coming out sometime this year, so I will watch that, but I was disappointed by this movie because I felt like it had so much potential. It really started out where I was like, this could be incredible, and then it just went nowhere. So the premise is that you are in a prison. You seem to be in some kind of alternate world where you can either voluntarily sign up to go into this prison temporarily, or you might be put there as a result of a crime. I think that it is many levels of a platform with a hole in the middle that the food comes down on this platform once a day. And the length of time that the platform is at your level is the only amount of time you will get to eat for that day. And whatever food is there is all that there is. So the top levels eat lots of food and then leave nothing for the bottom. You understand where we're going with this. Very, very violent movie, extremely violent. That premise sets up the potential for so much commentary, so many interesting things, and I felt like it just didn't follow through on any of that. So I'm very interested to see in the sequel if there is more discussion. So really interesting movie if you're okay with the level of gore that takes place, but ultimately I was left, literally, when we were watching it, we were like, that's it? That's the end? So hopefully the sequel will clear some things up. I don't know. Then I watched the movie Magical Girl. This is another super weird movie. I'm in my kind of artistic movie watching phase, which leads to some really, really weird movies. The setting of the movie is a father and daughter living on their own, and the daughter is dying, and the father wants to fulfill her dying wish. And so he kind of takes an at all costs strategy to make this happen, and that brings a couple other people into their circle, not personally, but brings a couple other people into the story who are a woman who is in a deeply concerning kind of life situation, and her former teacher. Very random connections. And yeah, I can't really say anything else about the movie because it would largely give away the plot, but another very violent, odd movie, but not gory, just disturbing things happen in this movie. I did ultimately feel like the point of the movie was very well done. I don't know, it's very hard to describe how I felt about this movie. It's a frustrating movie to watch because so much of what happens is so wildly unnecessary, but that's also like kind of the point of the movie. So anyway, I know that this does not that this description has not made any sense, but if you like really odd, frustrating, artistic movies with very quirky premises, then I would check this out. Un Hombre de Acción was a historical romp of a movie about a thief in France in the 1950s, approximately, a little bit before that, a little bit after that, who it's based on a true story of someone who kind of started out robbing banks but ended up being a forger, worked with like anarchist groups, who is Spanish, but it was during the dictatorship in Spain, so they had left Spain. Super enjoyable movie, very like basic depiction of like anarchism. Obviously it was a Netflix original, so it's not going to be like actually anti-capitalism, but it was fun to watch. Then I watched 20,000 Species of Bees. This is kind of a difficult movie to access. I did have to rent it from the platform Filmin, and I really, really liked this movie. So this is telling the story of a young girl in Basque country. So kind of, I'm not sure whether they lived in Spain and were traveling to France, or lived in France and were traveling to Spain, but regardless, they lived in Basque country and had family across the border. And so there is actually quite a lot of Basque in this movie, but obviously Spanish also. This little girl is trans, but no one knows yet or has acknowledged this. She is struggling with, life and not being recognized for her true self, and her mother is going through kind of a professional crisis, and so she's kind of, focused on that. The extended family is a little bit backwards in some ways emotionally, is kind of ramping up over this summer where you are with them, staying with extended family, and there's an aunt who is just life goals, beekeeping, queer-coded Tia. It doesn't end on a sad note, but obviously throughout the movie, sad things are happening, and also incredibly infuriating things. Like, it's so frustrating when you watch, like, liberal people who just, like, refuse to get it. Good movie. The actor who plays the main character is precious. Oh my goodness. And she did such a good job. So, yeah. Podcasts, I've only finished one recently, and that was En Boca Cerrada. This is telling the story of a very, very famous producer in Mexico who was kind of essentially brainwashing, semi-holding hostage in a cult-like atmosphere his, like, young singers, artists. So he had, at various points, between, like, 1 and, like, 12 young women or girls that he was just traveling with, living at a house all together. And the woman who made the podcast was one of the first ones, and so she was actually like his child bride at one point. She and another woman were also charged with like aiding him in keeping these girls, because they were adults by that point, like 30s. It's hard to listen because obviously, like, it's not an excuse for the fact that she helped him do these things, you know, by like staying quiet, by not warning anyone away, you know, all these things. But on the other hand, you know, hearing just about how thoroughly brainwashed she was. Like, she had been living with him for over half of her life. She'd been living with him or like under his thumb since she was like 13 or 14. And so just so thoroughly brainwashed. And so it's very not explicit. Like, the podcast doesn't really go into like, you know, details or anything like that, which is good because obviously that would be sketchy. Yeah, it was a good listen. It's definitely obviously a very like serious topic. Books. Man, it's been a long time since we've done one of these. It feels like I read some of these books a long time ago. 2 of these books were book club books, and so I have talked about them in a video in Spanish, so I will have that linked. I'll just talk about them briefly here first, quickly. So the first one was Todas las Hadas del Reino by Laura Gallego. This was not my favorite book. It was okay. It started out really strong it's like a retelling of fairy tales from the perspective of a fairy godmother and kind of the mishaps and underappreciation in the magical world for the fairy godmother. But then I felt like the plot just kind of went off the rails. The things that were happening didn't make any sense given the characters. And so, yeah, the second half of the book just really was not it for me, but it was okay. It wasn't like I hated it, and I mean, I didn't struggle to finish it. I just was kind of like, what? There is a second book out now. I wouldn't be opposed to reading it, but I'm also not rushing out to read it. Then Amanda Black is a kind of very short start to a series that's kind of a mysterious, light fantasy. So Amanda Black is our main character who was orphaned and discovers at the age of 13 that her parents had like a great secret, and she and her aunt, who she lives with, move into this mansion with this mysterious butler, and she's supposed to try to figure out the mystery of who and what her parents were and did and all this stuff, this family legacy. The setting of it I really, really liked. I said in the discussion that it reminded me of like the Addams Family setting, like the whole dark mansion and the butler and everything. Like, but yeah, the actual story, to me, the first installment left a lot to be desired, but also it's hard to tell whether that's just because I'm like 20 years older than the target audience. So, you know, it was okay. Okay, Mexico Land. I have been waiting to talk about this book. I already want to reread this. So this says a YA book. It has a very interesting tone and style. So spoiler potentially for a future, if you like this, try this video, is that the style of this book reminds me of A Series of Unfortunate Events, in that like it's a children's book, but incredibly dark things are happening and you're just like, whoa, that person just died, like what? And so, you know, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what the target audience of this book is, because also I would say it's more violent than A Series of Unfortunate Events. This is like anti-capitalist A Series of Unfortunate Events. So we're following a main character who is like 15 or something like that. To be honest, he reads way younger than that though. So his parents die and he is sent to live with his aunt and uncle in a different part of the country, and that falls apart and everything, and then he has to go on. You know, there's a lot of things that happen that obviously I can't explain. This is like the world that currently exists, particularly in Mexico, but on steroids of like inequality, the tourist like paradises that are set up everywhere where everybody around that lives around them, that works there and everything, can't afford any of it, aren't allowed to even be there except in certain, you know, roles. Very, very interesting book. I really, really liked this. I want to read a lot more from the author. It was definitely not a perfect story. There were parts of it that I think could have been cleaned up a lot. It kind of lost the thread a little bit at certain points, but overall, so good. I do highly recommend it. I didn't write down this whole title, but this is Un lugar soleado para gente sonriente o algo así. It'll be up here. This is a short story collection by Mariana Enriquez that just came out recently. I like this author quite a lot. Absolutely love Las Cosas que Perdimos en el Fuego, and so far I have really liked all of her short story collections. I think it goes The Things We Lost in the Fire, A Sunny Place for Shady People, and Our Part of the Night, I think would be my ranking so far. And possibly on further rereads, it will achieve higher status, because my thing is, it's an Argentinian author who writes horror that has a lot of like social undertones, social messaging, that sort of thing. They're not always like, at least to me, they're not always extremely obvious what she's writing about. Like, some of the stories, it's taken me like multiple listens to feel like I really understand, and even then it's like a very like interpretation based understanding. Again, it will need some rereads. I'll definitely re-listen to it. So far so good. Then I read, I don't know how to say this, I don't know if you're supposed to say this like Kentucky's, or if you're supposed to say it differently, I don't know. But I got this in New York, and this is by the same author as Fever Dream or Distancia de Rescate, which I loved. And I didn't like her short story collection nearly as well, but this one I really, really liked. So in this, they have released this thing that is basically like Furbies, if anybody remembers Furbies, but with a social media-esque type aspect. So it's a real person running the Furby. So there's a screen, the eyes of the Furby or the Kentucky are cameras, and so you either buy the device, like the stuffed animal thing, or you buy a tablet that power the stuffed animal thing with. And so this is basically like introducing a stranger into your home to like live with you, and obviously you can somewhat restrict its motion by like locking it in a cabinet or something, but if you don't, then that person can see anything that's happening in that room. So obviously there are many parallels between this and the way that we use social media, the way that, you know, we're sitting here right now. And so I said on Instagram, like, this did low-key make me want to delete absolutely everything I've ever put on the internet and never connect to the internet again. But there were also a very few parts, not very many, but very few parts that made you kind of appreciate the connection that you can have. Most of it was more on the negative side though, but I really liked this. I do think it could have been a little bit shorter. That's kind of the primary complaint I think in most of the reviews, is just that it was too long for what it was, that, you know, people struggled to connect to the characters because it does follow a huge amount of characters, some of which are interconnected, some of which are not really, and it's kind of more vignettes and that sort of thing, but I still really liked it. Then finally I read Sofoco, which is another short story collection, and I loved this one also. This one is another kind of social theme-based disturbing short story collection. It's a thing that I have. I love them. I can't help it. But this one is very short, and it was so interesting. And again, another one where I can't confidently say that I understood the point or the message of these stories, but they did make me think a lot, and another one that I would like to reread. I don't think the author has anything else out right now, but I hope that she does publish some things, because I really liked these and I thought that they had great potential. So that is everything for this episode. Let me know what you have been reading, watching, listening to, etc., and I will see you in the next video.